All right, American history students, we're going to keep powering through to lesson 6, and this is going to be the Great Depression side of the unit. You're going to notice that in the 30s, we're going to go from loving life in the 20s to the 30s, where it's going to be kind of depressing, greatly depressing. So we're going to get into, again, causes and effects of today, and you're going to notice that the Great Depression is going to drastically shift the Roaring Twenties lifestyle that we just established. And we're also going to get into the second bullet. We're going to finally see capitalism and how it kind of works. So do me a favor. If you do not understand the basics of capitalism, pause the video right now, give it a quick Google, and try to at least read it for a little bit. Okay, I'm going to explain it in my own way here in a little bit as well in the first couple of slides, but the more that you know going in, the better you're going to understand it when I talk about it. So this lesson specifically is going to be talking about the causes of the Great Depression. There are really 5 as historians identify, and I'm going to be talking about them to some length. So why does all this matter is that this is going to drastically shift that Roaring Twenties culture that we just established. And you're also going to notice that this economic crisis is going to be the second largest, or sorry, this is going to be the biggest, largest, whatever you want to call a descriptive word, economic problem that we've ever faced. A very close second is in 2008, when we hit a massive recession coming off of, 9/11, coming off the Afghan war starting, and so on and so forth. And most recently, 2020, the economic shift that coronavirus caused. So where this starts is with our new president, Herbert Hoover. So he was elected in 1928, but you got to know a little bit more about him so you can understand that how this Great Depression was not his fault, okay? But he also has some part of it. But when he was handed the economy in 1928 in the election, it was at its peak. So what we know in physics, what goes up must come down. But in his background, him being an Iowa-born gentleman, he is going to move to California. He's going to make himself into a millionaire. So he's really an inspirational story in that way, where he was orphaned at 6 weeks, and then he basically made himself into a big deal in the business world. So he has a very sharp economic mind. So it's kind of ironic that he is the last president holding the gun, if you will, before we go into this Great Depression, the economic crisis that it was. So enter in capitalism, something I just told you to stop and Google just in case you didn't know. But you're going to notice that capitalism is going to be a thing that's going to cause the Great Depression in a way, but it's in relationship to World War One. So we had a bunch of stuff being made during World War One that was shifting towards the war cause. So you're going to notice that we were making a lot of supply because the demand was high. Well, when World War One ended, the supply was still being made, but the demand went way down. And this is what Calvin Coolidge did. He ordered everybody to still kind of be making whatever they could that's going to cause life to be great in the 20s. And then when the war ended, that supply is going to be overproduction. So overproduction usually leads to sales, usually leads to poor economy, and that's what happens here. So, but back again, in the 20s, the economy was very, very good. And the Republicans took a lot of credit. So we've already talked about this first cause, and this is where you're going to see farmers are going to have the hardest go of this in the 1920s. They're producing crops for the World War One effort. And then when the war ends, that demand is going to go way down because the government no longer needs it. So, but shifting back to what was happening during World War One, they're going out and they're buying land, they're buying machinery, they're buying whatever they needed to in credit to meet that demand that the government had. Well, when the government dips out, they're the ones that are still holding the mortgages or the credit, if you will, of all the stuff that they bought, and they simply just cannot pay it back. They're not able to sell off their surplus crops, their overproduced crops, if you will. So what that eventually leads to is people losing their farms. So I know you guys don't know how big of a deal this is, but they're not only losing their job, but they're losing their place to live. So that's kind of a big deal. So going into question number 1, what problem did the farmers have? Cause number 2, The wealth is unevenly distributed. So, what does that mean? The rich were really rich and the poor were really poor. So, industrial workers, as I just said, they were making a bunch of stuff left and right. So, the example I'm going to say is cars. They were making so many cars during this time. So, where this is all going to come back to bite us is again, overproduction, oversupply, if you will. And you're going to notice that when they're making things, the profits of corporations are going to go up because it's being driven by the stock market. Okay. People buy stock into things that are going to make them money. And you're going to notice that people are going to get super duper rich with this. But the problem is that the wealthy people, once they're making their money, they're not spending it because they have so much that cash, if you will, is now out of the flow of the rest of the economy. So that's kind of a problem. So here is question number 2. True or false? Overproduction of consumer goods led to the Great Depression. Cause number 3, credit is going to hide problems. So you're going to notice that people were loving this thing called credit, meaning you could buy whatever you want now and pay for it later. So whatever the price is of the object that you're buying, you pay a little extra called interest, and you're going to pay it off eventually. So people were buying radios on credit, people were buying automobiles on credit, stuff I just talked about. And this is going to come back to bite them when they start buying stocks on credit. So there's a type of thing called buying on the margin. You pay for a little bit of the stock's total worth, and as long as that stock keeps making money, you can use that profit to pay off what you owe on the stock. But the problem is stock markets when they go down, you not only have to pay that original margin back, but now you're losing money at the same time. So this is going to basically cause debt to rack up. They're living beyond their means. So question number 3, how did credit lead to the Great Depression? All right, and finally, the crash. So you're going to be talking about the stock market crash here, and everybody says that this is the reason why the Great Depression happened, and I would beg to argue. So this is going to be just another thing that happens. So where this is all going to basically operate is very similar to like a casino, that you're going to take a chance, you're going to put money in, you might win, you might lose. But in this case, in the 20s, everybody was making money off the stock market because everybody was buying everything because they were buying on credit. People loved life. It was the roaring 20s. And then all of a sudden, this day of October 29th of 1929, known as Black Tuesday, is going to happen. Again, kind of like the roller coaster of life. They're at the peak before that first initial drop. And then here's that first initial drop. Everything just kind of stopped and everything just kind of went way below what was originally happening. So you're going to notice that people are going to lose billions of dollars. And I mean billions of dollars in a day. So imagine this, if you were to take a really valuable baseball card and rip it in half, that's what happens. Okay. This money, it disappeared. It's not like you still have something that was worth just a little less. I mean, it just was lost. So going into the next question, how much money was lost during the stock market crash of October 29th? And then going into the last reason. So the bank system collapse. You're going to notice that banks, they are going to get hit the hardest. So people are going to go in and they're going to want to get their cash out. But the problem is that banks only carry so much cash in hand. So they loan cash out or they loan money out, and that's how they make money be off that interest. So when everybody goes in to get their money at once, they only have so much, and then once they're out, they're out. This is not like banks today. They're not being backed by the government. So people just lost their money. And that's going to come back into with very limited cash in circulation. So that's why I'm saying that it's not one thing. It's all 5 of these things kind of operating together. It's kind of like in mania of World War One. No one is more important than the other, I guess you would say. But some people tend to think so. All right, going into the last question. How did bank failures contribute to the Great Depression? I apologize. There must be another question. All right. So the Great Depression is officially on. It starts in 1929, and the economy kind of rebounded, but then it eventually went right back down. And you're going to notice that during this stretch of 12 years, unemployment is going to get as high as 25%, which is ginormously large. During coronavirus, I think it got to like 22, 23, somewhere in that range. Now, also to give it in comparison, during the Roaring 20s, unemployment never got to 4%. So this is a huge shift in our culture. And you're going to notice that the rest of the world is also going through the Great Depression. So this is what's going to give fuel to people like Hitler, Mussolini, people that are going to start World War II. They're going to start talking to their people. They're desperate people. If there's a better life, give me power, and then we're going to make it happen. So this is the last question. True or false? The Great Depression happened around the world.